Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Pulp Crazy. I'm your host, Jason Aiken. In this week's episode, I'm going to be taking an in-depth look at The Tree by H.P. Lovecraft. It's an early Lovecraft tale, having first appeared in the October 1921 issue of Tryout. It was later reprinted in the August 1938 issue of Weird Tales. This is a pretty short story, so to do it justice, I'm going to discuss the whole thing from start to finish. Now, this is a fairly unusual story for H.P. Lovecraft. First off, on the surface, it's not really a Cthulhu Mythos story per se, but one could retrofit it into the mythos if they choose to. The second is the setting. The tree is set in ancient Rome. According to the introduction to the tree in H.P. Lovecraft, The Complete Fiction, we can roughly set the tree around the middle of 4th century B.C. Now, I've read a decent amount of Lovecraft's earlier work, and The Tree has a very similar prose style to his early Dunsanian tales. However, as far as the plot is concerned, according to Wikipedia, he may have been inspired by Arthur Machen's The Great God Pan. The Tree opens with the Latin phrase, Fata viam invenient, which translates to, the fates will find a way. Now, let me apologize in advance here, as my pronunciation for some of these names and places probably isn't going to be correct, but I'll try to be consistent, even if I'm consistently wrong. The Tree is told through a third-person narrative, with the narrator relaying a story told to him by an old beekeeper. The Tree focuses on two extraordinarily talented sculptors who lived together on Mount Mainalis in Arcadia. Their names are Kalos and Mucides. While both are talented sculptors, the nocturnal activities they choose to partake in their free time, are vastly different. Mucides likes to spend his nights reveling in the city of Tegea, but Kalos prefers to frequent an olive tree grove. In the cool recesses of the grove, he meditates on the visions that filled his mind, and later brings them to life through marble. Some people believe that Kalos converses with the spirits of dryads and fauns that inhabit the grove, and he uses them as the basis for his sculptures. Now, just a side note here, Lovecraft would revisit this concept later. The concept of an artist using real supernatural creatures as models for their art. He would do this in the short story Pickman's Model. The Tree starts to move forward when the tyrant of Syracuse, Dionysius I, or otherwise known as Dionysius the Elder, hires the pair to sculpt a statue of Tyche. Now, just a glance at Dionysius's Wikipedia page, and I get the impression that he wasn't a good guy. The words cruel and tyrant jump out at me, and that usually indicates that this wasn't the most stand-up guy around. It looks like he either drank himself to death after hearing some good news, or he was poisoned. He's only mentioned in the story, though, commissioning Mucides and Kalos to each sculpt a statue of Tyche. I had to look up who Tyche was, as I'm not up on my Greek mythology as much as I used to be. Tyche is the goddess that governed the fortune, prosperity, and destiny of a particular city. So it makes sense that Dionysius would want an impressive statue to erect in Syracuse. Now, as I mentioned, Dionysius hires both Musides and Kalos, but he hires them to work on separate statues. In his mind, he knows that they will share their work with each other, thus creating a little competition and inspiration between them that will elevate their creativity to even greater levels of artistic genius. He hopes the loveliest of the two will eclipse even the dreams of poets. So he has a little bit of a tactical thing going here, and some high hopes too. But things don't progress in that fashion. The people of Tegea notice that Musides becomes depressed. At the same time, Kalos also falls ill. Musides is at his bedside the whole time, attempting to nurse him back to health. Although he was sick, many said Kalos had a look of happy serenity on his face that set him apart from the depressed Musides. During this time, both of the sculptors quit working on their respective statues of Teach. When Kalos is on the verge of death, he asks to be carried to the olive tree grove that he often frequented. Musides is hurt that Kalos would rather spend his final moments among the dryads and fauns rather than him, but he still makes good on his friend's request. Not only that, Musides promises Kalos that he will build him a fantastic marble sepulchre in his honor. But Kalos' only request is for Musides to bury twigs from certain olive trees from the grove near his final resting place. Specifically, he wants Musides to bury the twigs near his head. When Kalos dies, Musides builds a wonderful sepulchre for his friend, with bas reliefs on par with the work of Kalos himself, and he keeps his word, burying the olive twigs near his friend's head. Once his grief passes, Musides begins to work on his statue of Tyche once more. Since the tyrant of Syracuse only desired Musides or Kalos to sculpt the statue, it was now solely up to Musides to complete. For 3 years, Musides worked steadily, shaking off the depression that he had previously felt. While doing so, an olive tree sprouts up near where Kalos is buried, near his head. Musides begins to spend his evenings near this tree, and the tree grows fast and into a strange shape. It both fascinates and repels Musides. It takes him 3 years, but Musides finishes the statue of Tyche and sends a messenger to the tyrant of Syracuse. Now by this point, the strange tree has grown to humongous proportions, greater than any other tree of its kind. One of the odd things about the tree is a heavy branch that grew out and over the apartment where Musides works. I really like this particular passage, so I will use Lovecraft's exact words here regarding another weird feature of the tree. The bleak mountain wind, sighing through the olive grove and the tomb tree, had an uncanny way of forming vaguely articulate sounds. Now, on a dark night, the emissaries of Dionysius come to collect the statue, and on this night a heavy wind shrieked through the area. When the emissaries arrive at the villa, they discover that the heavy branch hanging over Musides' apartment has fallen, reducing it to ruins. The emissaries looked to the wreckage, then to the strange tree, which had a vaguely human appearance, and whose roots reached into the sepulchre of Kalos. When they searched the ruins of the apartment, they found not a trace of the statue of Teach or Mercedes himself. The olive grove still stands today. So does the strange tree growing from Kalos' tomb. The old beekeeper told the narrator that sometimes the boughs whisper to each other in the night. They repeat these words over and over. I know. I know. That's how the story ends. Let me first say that I really like this story, and I find a lot of Lovecraft's early work to be quite good. It's definitely in a different vein from his later work, but all the early Lovecraft stories that I've read from this period have been some pretty solid fantasy stories in my opinion. The Tree is no different. I like how Lovecraft really doesn't spell out everything for the reader here. But here's my take on what happened. I believe that Mercedes grew jealous of Kalos, not only for him spending time in the olive grove, but for his superior sculptures that resulted from him being in tune with the spirits of the grove. I believe that Mercedes thought he would have trouble competing with Kalos in this sculpting duel. He either knew this from the outset, or he saw Kalos' piece for himself, and he just knew he had to do something to compete with it. I think Mercedes began to poison Kalos. This accounts for Mercedes' depression and Kalos' illness. Since Mercedes was at Kalos' bedside the whole time, I believe he was even poisoning him at that point. And his depression was brought on by the fact that he's knowingly poisoning and killing his best friend, and it's just taking a toll on him physically. After Kalos dies, I don't believe Mercedes works on the statue of Teach that he was sculpting, but instead takes up working on Kalos' statue instead. I think that's why both Mercedes and the statue are missing from the apartment after the tree branch falls on it. Now, what power is within this tree? Is it Kalos controlling and acting as the tree? Or is it a spirit from the grove, possibly the god Pan? I have to admit, I haven't read Machen's The Great God Pan yet, but I look forward to doing that, as it will probably add some additional perspective on this for me. Like I said, I have to read Machen's The Great God Pan, and probably do a Wikipedia search on Pan too, to help fill in the gaps on this one. Now, if you want to read The Tree for yourself, I'll put links to it in the show notes. It's in the public domain, and it's available in a free ebook. There's e-text of it out there, and there's an audio reading of it as well. The short story's not very long. I would say it's probably close to flash fiction in length. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Pulp Crazy is located at pulpcrazy.com. I also have a brand new Instagram page, located at instagram.com/pulpcrazy, where I share pictures and anecdotes from Pulp magazine covers. I'm also at Pulp Crazy on Twitter and facebook.com/pulpcrazy. My YouTube channel is located at youtube.com/pulpcrazy. Please share, like, and subscribe if you're enjoying the show. You can also email me your feedback at pulpcrazy@gmail.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.